You know, some years ago here in Los Angeles, there was a serial killer I call the Hillside Strangler. I believe that was Richard Ramirez.
But no, he was a Night Stalker.
Night Stalker.
The Hillside Strangler was two guys, Bianchi,
right?
Anthony Bianchi, and I forgot who the other guy was.
Well, what I had in mind was Richard Ramirez, because I remember there were a number of murders. But as soon as they were linked to a serial killer, the anxiety level of the community escalates significantly, and then the pressure on the law enforcement to find this person really goes up, because no longer are they random; they're linked. And the thing that I was sitting here listening, Tim, is that most of us on the outside don't know anything about law enforcement or investigative techniques except what maybe we see on CSI Miami or something like that.
Sure.
But when you have some unsolved murders, do law enforcement agencies in Boston, for example, have a process where they sit down, if they've got someone they think that is guilty of a particular murder, do they then go back to unsolved cases? Do they have computer software that can help them to link similarities to try to ascertain if there is indeed, in fact, a serial killer at work?
It isn't until we really got into looking at him as a suspect that we realized he had gone bankrupt, and I got all of his credit cards for the time period preceding his arrest. And what we found out was he had charged credit gas in 3 or 4 trips across the country.
Really? So maybe there's other murders out there.
Well, that's just it. There was no records kept in the same way that there is today.
Did you ever have any conversations with good old Lenny?
I did, actually. I had when I got this case with Maria Iannuzzi's murder, the more logical suspect was her boyfriend. So that's part of the reason why it was unsolved at the time period, that it was almost 3 years, was that there was this uncertainty as to who was the more likely suspect. And at first blush, it was her boyfriend. They had a history of abuse between the two of them. He had a drug issue. He had had a temper. He had, shortly before she was murdered, he had actually strangled her, attempted to strangle her. So, at first blush, it looked like he was the more likely suspect. But Paradiso was seen the night of her murder, leaving with her from this bar. And it wasn't until we started linking up other factual information about Paradiso that it became clear that he was the killer. And my meeting with him was what I did. It was because of this uncertainty. We subpoenaed everybody. Both the boyfriend and Paradiso and all their supporting witnesses and non-supporting witnesses into the grand jury. So they're all under oath at that point in time. And each one I interviewed before they went into the grand jury, including Paradiso. So I did have a first-hand meeting with him and discussed his potential testimony. And shortly before,
what was your take? What was your take on him?
Well, it was. Without being melodramatic of it, there was an aura about him. There was, in my mind, he was a killer. There was something that was very, in my feeling, was that he was an evil person.
Mm-hmm. Did you find him manipulative?
Well, he had a 6th grade education.
Okay.
So it's not like he was intellectually bright, but he certainly was criminally sophisticated.
Yeah. And
he had been operating in the streets and avoided detection for literally 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, Maria Iannuzzi's boyfriend, he certainly had his own flaws.
Yeah.
But he was a willing witness.
Yeah.
And he wanted to testify, and in fact did testify before the grand jury, whereas Paradiso refused to testify, exercised his Fifth Amendment privilege, and there's a lot of other information that we got subsequent to that, from informants who he was in jail with.
Right.
That,
let me ask
only
you,
come from him.
Let me ask you one final question in the few moments we have left. In a case like this, with your book, it just came out in February, didn't it?
A year ago, February.
A year ago, February. In a case like this, you got some unsolved murders. You have the prime suspect who's deceased, okay?
Right.
Do you think the police department are going to spend any time or money linking him to any of these cases, or they're just done and over? Is that a general policy? When their primary suspect is dead, they just leave the cases alone?
Well, I think what if you follow some of the news clips, what happened shortly after the book came out, the local district attorney from Essex County, which is north of Suffolk,
Right.
and where these 3 young prostitutes were taken,
Mm-hmm.
did renew his investigation of those murders.
Yeah.
Based on
So it's still
information.
an open case.
Yeah. So that's to his credit,
Yeah.
and actually for the benefit of the victims' families.
Excellent. Now,
Did that.
you have a private practice right now. Do you have a website or a phone number you want to hand out on the radio?
It's 781-455-0707.
Okay.
And I'm happy to say I have 2 sons who are just recently graduated from law school and joining my practice.
Hey, congratulations.
Congratulations, yeah.
Thank you.
And let me just say, the book is the Paradiso Files, Boston's Unknown Serial Killer. It's written by Tim Burke. And go out and buy it, and thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure, Steve. Roger, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim.
Joining us now is Eve Carson. She is the former sister-in-law of Joan Webster, who is one of the women that was murdered in Massachusetts. I think it was in 1981 or 82. And our former guest, Tim Burke, seems to think that she may have been killed by Leonard Paradiso. And it is, he talks a little bit about it in his book. Welcome to the show, Eve.
Thank you very much.
I am looking at a piece of paper that you sent me. It says False Assertions in the Paradiso Files by Timothy Burke.
Correct.
And interestingly enough, and Roger and I are very unbiased in this. We have you on the show because, you are there, okay? And you know this case pretty intimately because Joan was your sister-in-law, correct?
I lived through this.
Yes, and you've lived through it over the last, 30 years? Was it 1981 or 2?
1981. It'll be
1981.
28 years in November.
I'm looking at your first item. It says, on page 2 of Tim's book, it says, True Story of Serial Killer Who Murdered Joan Webster. Joan Webster is an open murder investigation. I asked him about that in his interview, and he said, yes, one of the district attorneys in one of the local districts has reopened these cases as a result of this book. Anything to say about that?
He reopened the cases, and we did get a notification of that. I've worked with an attorney out in Boston, and the case was reopened last September, shortly after finding out that a new investigation was taking place.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, because rather than going through each one of these item by item, I want you to tell our audience what is your main problem with the book, okay? What are the issues you have, all right?
All right.
And second of all, there's one question that you need to know the answer to that I asked Tim Burke. It was a general question. As a result, if the main target, if the main suspect has died, which Leonard Paradiso is dead now,
that is correct.
Will law enforcement pursue some of these cases, these cold cases, if they think he did it? And he said, as a matter of fact, they opened, I think, 3 cases for 3 of the girls right there. What issues do you have with Tim's book?
Tim's book is false on many counts. There have been documents that have surfaced. We're unable to access the murder files from Essex County in Massachusetts. They have denied FOIA requests, but several other documents have surfaced that clearly refute allegations he's made.